Thanks for listening to the People Not Titles podcast. We are brought to you by our great sponsors, Land Trust Title Services, your partners for results. Well, okay, lights, camera, action. I'm here with our senior marketing manager, Matt Lombardi. We are the People Not Titles podcast, and I'm excited to have you, Matt. Thanks for being here.
Steve, thank you. As I've said to you now a couple times, I've been waiting 2 years for this opportunity, and I'm not going to let you down.
All right. Well, you've crossed over to the other side of superstardom.
And let me say a few words for Steve here.
Yes.
He has been doing this for 2.5 to 3 years, and
Yes.
he's the hardest working man that I know, and he couldn't do a better job. And like I said, I'm just so proud and excited to be part of this experience.
Well, thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. And check will be in the mail there on that one.
Not at all.
Well, it's a labor of love, that's for sure. We have so many people that I meet during the weeks that I just feel like their story needs to be told, and so it's my honor and privilege to be able to do it. But today is going to be a little different, and we're going to be doing this. We're not going to commit to how often, but let's just say we're going to do it today, and that is that we're going to talk a little bit about the market, a little bit about some of the news, and some other things that might be of interest to folks, entrepreneurs, real estate investors, agents, attorneys, mortgage people, whatever it is. And I will say a disclaimer that more than likely, if you watch this a year from now, you'll realize we didn't know what we were talking about. But just like everybody else who seems to have an opinion of it, we get to have one too.
That's a good way to put it. And there's been so much happening in our industry, from home sales, inventory, lawsuits, settlements, that, as Steve just said, a year from now, we don't know what's going to happen. But at this snapshot in time, I think it's a good opportunity for us to sit down and sort of talk about the news of the day.
Yeah, and I think it's good, Matt, as I'm thinking here, to share our perspective from a standpoint of we're not just two schmucks that fell off the turnip truck. I started a mortgage company in 1996, built it to be fairly large, had my own title insurance company, invested in a lot of real estate, and really had a front row seat to the era known as the Big Short era. And I think, Matt, just maybe share a little bit of your background. Were you around during the Big Short as well?
I have been around for quite a while.
Okay. As young as you look, you've been around for a while.
I appreciate that. My entire career, as I reflect on it, has been entirely in the real estate industry and or legal side of things. And this has been mostly in member associations. The bulk of my previous career was with National Association of Realtors, with some leadership roles, some vice president roles, with marketing communications, events. Previous to that, I was with affiliates of NAR, and then I had a year at a legal association.
Okay.
So I've been around for the ups and downs of the real estate market and seeing how it affects not only home buyers, sellers, but also industry professionals.
Great. Well, so Matt, you have a lot of experience at the NAR. You've seen how the sausage is made at the NAR, how they operate. And we're not going to get necessarily into that, the dirty laundry of it, not to say that there is any, but I do want to talk a little bit about, I think it's on top of everyone's mind, the most recent NAR settlement. And let's talk just about the impact of it from your view.
So what I'll say is NAR has always been historically not under attack, but always getting hit with different lawsuits. Could be regarding the term realtor, definitely about how commissions are paid and structured. So this has been ongoing through 20 to 30 years as part of their operations at the NAR.
Matt, and there's a lot of realtors that know what the NAR is, but I think for most of the rest of the population, maybe just talk about who the NAR is and what their primary functions are.
National Association of Realtors is the largest professional member association in the United States and maybe the world. I believe their current membership hovers around 1.5 million. I was there when it was 700,000, and then we got to 1 million, and it just kept growing and
Once
growing.
you got there, just the numbers exploded.
Sure, and
Yeah.
we'll attribute it to that. But it is a very political organization. Lobbying efforts historically are number 1 or number 2 in expenditures each year. So they are in deep with the politicians from a lobbying perspective.
And they have a lot of power.
A lot of money, a lot of power in Washington, D.C., and in fact, in local communities as well. Huge political activities at the city, state, local, village level as well. So the organization itself, very big, very powerful, but they're also a professional organization. And the term Realtor, for those that don't know, is a trademark name. And it means a member of the National Association of Realtors.
So if you call yourself a realtor, it's
Correct.
because you're part of the NAR. You might say
Correct.
it because of a different reason, because you're in real estate. But really, that name has been that's like Pat Riley. Didn't he trademark three-peat?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Even
And
though I don't think, did he have a three-peat? Oh, he did with the Lakers, actually. Maybe.
he might have. I
Maybe.
don't know.
We know who had a three-peat twice.
Correct. But yes, he
Yeah.
did trademark that.
Right.
But so there's just over 2 million real estate licensees in the United States, which means someone has gone through the state process to get licensed as a real estate professional, gone through the licensing, has paid their dues, and they get their real estate license. And out of that, about 1.5 million have chosen to become realtors.
Okay, so what is the difference between the 500,000 people that decided not to be a realtor and the 1.5 million that did?
I don't know the exact answer, but I know a lot of people have a license, Steve, that are in the real estate community. So a lot of mortgage people may get it. I actually had my license a couple times over the last 30 years,
Okay.
and it was more so just to go through the process to see the education that was being provided by the state, and so I could serve our community of realtors better to know what they went
through. So you
through.
could be licensed as a realtor and not a realtor.
Right. And so a lot of people have a license, and what they hang it at a brokerage, but they're not really practicing, which means they may do a deal for themselves along the way.
Okay, so let's talk about this lawsuit, Matt. Just give us a brief thing. How did the lawsuit begin, and what was the heart of it?
So the lawsuit started, I forget how long ago, and it became a class action lawsuit that was taken up in the state of Missouri in Kansas City. And I think it was chosen because it was an advantageous location. The attorneys were able to get a class action done more easily there. And so that's where it transpired, the Seitzer-Burnett lawsuit. That whole process went about, and the class action, it went through. And NAR continued to fight it. Home Services was part of that. I think Compass was part of that. Help me if I'm wrong.
Keller Williams.
Keller Williams was part of it. So that happened
Remax.
in the fall or late summer last year. And then along the way, Keller Williams decided to settle. Compass just settled. I forget who is left as part of this lawsuit, which I was just looking up, is Home Services.
Okay.
They're the last broker standing as part of any of this class action or settlement. They have chosen not to settle and are progressing with this.
Okay.
But it's essentially a conspiracy of commissions, meaning NAR, which controls and manages most of the MLSs here in the United States, conspired to hold commission levels for realtors at a certain level. And in the media, we'll say 6%. It's 5, 6, could be 4, it could be anything. So the one side of it from the NAR is, no, everything is negotiable. We did not conspire. The Department of Justice, the plaintiff's attorneys think differently. So that's where it sort of started this most recent time. And then, surprisingly, on the morning of March 15th, an announcement came out. Many of us were together in a meeting where the announcement was NAR just settled the Department of Justice settlement for $400 to $450 million.
And so that settlement encompassed quite a few of the smaller brokerages, but it left 100 or so brokerages out and gave them kind of a method and a calculation for settlement as well. And so the NAR is thinking that they want to put this behind them, right? they want to get this settled. And let's talk, and you can read 1,000 different articles about that, and we'll let you do that. Let's talk about the impact of the settlement, or what some of the pieces of the agreement was, Matt. What were some of the elements of it?
So the biggest two takeaways from the settlement are these things. Number one, there will be no more offers of compensation in the MLSs. So when a listing goes live, there will be no compensation offered as it historically has been to the buy side. So that's number one. And then the second biggest takeaway.
So, and that is, Matt, for some of the novices in real estate, when the listing goes live, that is a seller through a realtor putting their property up on the MLS and saying, hey, listen, the listing agent's going to get X, and the buyer's agent, if you show this property and are bringing us a buyer, you're going to get X. No longer can a selling agent make an offer to a buying agent of commission on the MLS.
That is 100% correct.
Okay.
So no more offers of compensation to bring a ready, willing, and able buyer to the table from the buy side. But the second biggest thing is a requirement will be coming on board where buyer-broker agreements will become mandatory for all real estate transactions. So now, to bifurcate the deal, which is what the government and Department of Justice has been asking for, which is when someone is selling their home, if they choose to list it with a realtor, there is going to be a listing agreement as there has been historically. On the other side of this, moving forward, the buyer side, the buyers will now need to, if they choose to work with a agent, get their own buyer brokerage deal that sets out that commission or payment structure for that agent. So it's a whole different business model that the industry is going towards. Many brokerages have been sort of going down this path, understanding that this is a different approach and maybe the right approach to it, to make it less confusing for home buyers and home sellers. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a big change for a lot of professionals in the industry because everybody's been operating under this one system. And that's one thing to think about from a realtor perspective, because I remember going through this process myself a few times on the buy side, where it was, how much do I pay you? And the answer given me was, you don't have to pay me anything.
The seller will.
And depending on who you worked with, it would say, yes, I'm going to get compensated from the sale of this. You don't have to worry about it. And that's where the big distinction comes in.
Yes.
And then what comes in with this, and I don't mean to keep talking,
No,
is, is this going to be good for home buyers and sellers moving forward? So if you see a lot of media reports, the headlines are, commissions are going to be slashed. Home prices are going to come down dramatically. I don't think that's going to happen, but a year from now when we revisit this, Steve, maybe we'll have better clarity on it. But there's the bottom line is it's a change in the industry practice, and secondarily, we and the industry doesn't know the true impact of this until it goes into place. And the settlement that NAR came to agreement with the Department of Justice, I believe it goes into effect, if accepted, in July.
Okay, and so if you've ever bought a home, you've had various experiences with a buyer's agent, and some of the buyer's agents that when I bought a home, we actually did sign a buyer's agreement, an exclusive agreement, so that they're out there, they're busting it, they're finding a home. So the value of an agent has always been there, and I think for now on the buy side, it's going to need to be more articulate. It's going to need to be more pronounced from the standpoint of them actually sharing all the work that they do. And I know they do work from looking at the property, having their ear to the ground, and being a professional in the industry, to helping with negotiations, to helping with inspections, to walking this through all the way to the closing time, coordinating things with the mortgage people, with the appraiser, with the inspector. So there's a lot of moving parts. The workman is due their wage, and it's just going to be, how are they going to collect that? And I would say that lenders are getting creative, right? They're talking about how they can, because if you're a first-time home buyer, you don't have 3% to pay the buyer's agent and 3% down and this and that and all these different things. People are wondering, how is this going to work? And what I will say is, in my view, The buyer's agent will still be compensated. It's just a matter of how, and I think there'll be a bunch of creative options that'll go forward. So anyway, it's all part of the conversation with it, which I think anytime you can disclose how people are getting paid and what the value they're bringing for that payment, it's going to be healthy for the consumer.
And absolutely, I think that's the biggest takeaway is I personally feel most consumers don't understand the process and many times may not ask the right questions or be told the right answers. So I think this new process will alleviate a lot of the ambiguity that has happened in the industry. But Steve, you bring up great points. The realtors that are out there every day are the conduits to the community. I mean, they really are. As you said, they're the conduits for the financing, they're conduits for the, I need my home fixed up. They're an information resource for the community, and yes, they need to prove their value to their consumers, either the home seller or home buyer, but it's there. And those industry professionals that are doing this every day, I don't think they're worried about it. I think there's some that may not be fully part of the industry, maybe do a deal a year. They may go by the wayside because the expense ratio of holding your license, being a member of NAR, the MLS associated dues, and that's the speculation is a lot of realtors that are currently as part of the membership may go away. And we don't know what's going to happen, so we'll see a year from now, but I think there will be a drop in membership.
Yeah, my experiences too, I think that people were very intentional about hiring a listing agent. So if you're going to list your home, the people came over and made a presentation, they did all these different things, and you really made a selection of the best professional to sell your property. I don't think that same choice intentionality was used for a buyer's agent. And I think what you're going to see the difference is now, as I think people are going to be interviewing people and saying, okay, listen, I'm going to buy a home. Who's going to be my agent that'll represent me, as opposed to, oh, I want to see this property, I'll get this agent. You have sometimes buyers have 3 or 4 agents out there hunting properties down, and I think it's going to be now narrowed down to you're going to pick, of course, you're going to have to pick one agent, sign a buyer's agreement, and that agent is really going to get to know you intimately and what kind of property that you want, what you and your family are looking for, and they're going to be able to get out there and find it. And the ones who are really good at all of that are going to wind up reaping. So I believe it'll be a kind of the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
That the kind of the bottom performers are going to be culled from the group, unfortunately, or fortunately, I think.
And I think most people in the industry would say that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
More and once again, I've been around in this industry for almost 30 years now, and it's been the rally cry is we need more professionalism, we
100%.
need better service.
Yeah.
So let's do it.
Yeah, and I think that, Matt, looking back at my experience in the mortgage industry, you had people that were, you had all kinds of people that were, candlestick makers and butchers all coming into the mortgage industry. And when times got tough and relationships with industry professionals and your expertise and all these things had to be a cornerstone of your business, during that 2008 period when there was less corn on the ground for the chicken to feed on, a lot of the unprofessionals got weeded out, and what you had the real producers that stuck it out. And so whenever I meet a mortgage person that tells me they got into business before 2006, I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people got shook out during that period of time, and the professionals wound up standing. I think you're going to see a lot of the same thing, that you're going to see the numbers go down and the quality go up. And anytime that happens, I think it's going to be a good thing.
One data point that I think is important to share is 91, 92, 93% of transactions use a real estate professional.
Yeah.
So I'm going back to when the internet was born and before Zillow came about.
We can thank Al Gore for that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And I remember being part of meaningful, deep conversations with realtors and leadership at that time saying, we're going to be out of business.
Yes.
There will be no need for our professional.
We went from the big books to the internet, and we're like, oh my gosh, they're going to find our homes on their own.
And so it was, they're not, home buyers and sellers aren't going to need a professional to help them guide through this. They're going to be able to do this. And what happened was the complete opposite. The number of people using representation incrementally went up each year. And like I said, it's about 92, 93% as of last year.
Okay, so we're going to shift from the NAR, Matt, and we're going to go to So Joe Biden mentioned on the State of the Union,
yes,
that they were going to eliminate the title insurance cost, and right, something like that.
So I was watching the State of the Union, and it was at the very end of it. Like literally, I was getting up from the couch to walk away, and I hear, I am going to wait. It's something to the effect of,
Did you play the State of the Union drinking game or no?
I did not play any drinking games associated with the State of the Union this time.
Okay.
But I did watch it. I always try and watch it to hear what is said. And
yes, of course.
I won't go into the too much applause and standing up and how it could be condensed from an hour and a half to 2 hours to about 30 minutes. But
yes,
everybody's got to stand and cheer. But at the very tail end, it was just like this passing comment. And it was like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Wait a second.
What's going on here?
Yeah.
My wife, she's like, what? So I rewound it, and it was just a sentence about, I am going to propose that we waive title fees for certain mortgage transactions.
Yes.
And it was this passing thing, and then the next day we were back here like, what was this? And then our legal counsel was like, here is what it is. So my understanding, and ALTA, the American Land Title Association, is 100% against this. This is just a proposal from the administration saying in certain refinancing, there will be no title insurance required, where an attorney opinion letter may work instead of getting title insurance. What's transpired in the past month and change is this is probably dead on arrival from what our people say.
Too much risk.
A lot of risk. The bottom line is title insurance is an important part of the transaction to ensure that, A, when the transaction happens, it's good, but also for the future, that if things come up with mechanics, liens, or anything else, where someone is trying to claim ownership of this property, that you need that title insurance to cover you. So I don't think, from what I've heard from our legal counsel, what I've read, this is a dead-on-arrival proposal, but it's still out there.
Right. It was a talking point, and it was connected to refinances initially, that you could do some types of refinances for Fannie and Freddie for them to be able to sell mortgages to the secondary market, that an attorney opinion letter as opposed to title insurance might be something that'll happen. But even that did not happen. So all that to say that I think it was just a nice little thing out there for homeowners to think, oh, they're advocating and my costs are going down, and they're not going down.
Right.
And their coverage is not, and risk is not going down either.
Correct. And this is
People Not Titles podcast is proud to be sponsored by Land Trust Title Services, your partners for results.
Correct. And this is an election year, so a lot of stuff is going to get thrown out there to make it sound good. And I have a question for you, Steve. Like, in your history in the industry, has this ever happened? Has this ever, something like this has been proposed?
No, nothing has been proposed in terms of title insurance. Has always been a staple of the transaction. It is like, I like to liken title, because people who are out there going, oh, what's title insurance? Kind of like the referee of the transaction, where one party brings in the buyer brings in the money, and the title company says, yep, that's good, we have money and it's good. And then the seller brings in their side of the equation, which is a clean title, no encumbrances on this. And so the title company says, yes, this is good. Yes, this is good. Ding, we have a match. As opposed to an attorney opinion letter. And then if something does happen, the title company misses it, you have these huge, massive underwriters who have a tremendous amount of financial credibility and strength to make sure that the buyer or the seller will be whole if something is missed. And in this case, with the attorney opinion letter, the security would only be as good as the attorney's net worth. And if you have some attorney that's working out of their basement watching Scooby-Doo typing opinion letters, next thing you know, you got to track down, the attorney or Scooby or Shaggy or whoever to try to get your money back.
So we're staying on top of this. We work with our legal counsel is part of Alta. So we're at the forefront of information, and we've shared a lot of information with our attorneys, and we'll continue to share information updates. But my hunch on this is it's not going to move forward, but until it's not moving forward, we'll keep you posted.
Great. Okay,
Yeah.
Matt, now we have mortgage rates. The Fed met, right? And what did the Fed have to say?
So the last time the Fed met, which I believe was a week ago, they
Yes.
said we're not touching the interest rates at this point in time, but indicated that they will be reducing it 3 times in the future this year.
Okay.
Which everybody gets excited about because lower rates means lower mortgage rates, which means people will move off the fence and all these good things. In advance of this, I was actually, and you're probably very familiar with this, Steve, is looking at the 30-year running average of mortgage rates.
Yes.
And where we're at now compared to where we've been. And, it's funny. My first mortgage, I was excited. I think I got my first mortgage in 1993, and I got it at 7.75,
Okay.
which is great.
Yeah.
And then it goes up, it goes down. We have been living, as everybody probably knows, and if you don't, over the past few years, historically low interest rates. 5, 4, 3%.
Right. Some even in the 2s for like a window of time.
So, exactly. And so mortgage rates have fluctuated. We've just, and especially in the last, I'll say 10 years, it's been historically low. But if you look at the 30-year average, it's probably 8 to 9% average. So what is that sweet spot? There is no sweet spot, but everybody is used to lower mortgage rates, and through one reason or another, it is what it is. And I understand the Fed, especially coming out of COVID, they did certain things to avoid a recession. And that's why they raised the interest rates incrementally. I forget, 10 to 15 times. So we reached a point where inflation, depending on who you ask, has been tempered. And it has. The U.S. inflation compared to most every country around the world is significantly better. But that doesn't mean that people aren't paying more for things,
Right.
including mortgage rates.
Right. And so we'll get off of the news for a second, Matt, and just talk about what are we experiencing, right, here in Chicagoland. And so what I would say is we have very tight inventory. We have half the number of listings than there were a year ago.
We are, I think, year over year here in Chicago, down 20%.
Right.
But exactly what you're saying, Steve, if you look at a graph, which I think we recently looked at, we are half the number of listings this year / last year than we were 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's just, and that is the reason why home prices are inflated so much, and there's just not enough inventory. And, and so what also has transpired, and you said this earlier, about so many people have refinanced along the way. During COVID, I think the industry expected the worst, and it became one of the best. Because people were like, I don't want to live here. Mortgage rates were very low, 3.5% at that time. People, when they bought and got a very low interest rate, or they refinanced, like I refinanced during that time as well, and got a great rate. I think 2.15 for a 10-year mortgage.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
And so what has transpired, and I'm sure a lot of you watching and listening to this will say this, is people don't want to move because they're locked into such a low interest rate.
Yeah.
And if they move, it's going to be double, potentially triple of what they paid or what they're paying.
Yeah, and
So that's the
people
tough
usually
part.
move because they want to buy a bigger home or they want to downsize or whatever it is. But either way you look at it and say, okay, unless I want to get out of Dodge, right? Which is a major reason why people are moving in Chicagoland is to leave totally. But if you're just going to transfer a little bit, it's going to be a costly decision. You really have to weigh into it, and that's what's keeping people stuck to some degree, is the fact that they're enjoying such a great rate for their home right now.
And as we just talked about, the inventory is so low. And it's not just in Chicago, the Midwest, the entire country.
Yes.
It's so low. So supply and demand. A lot of people still need somewhere to live. There's so few properties. That's why prices go up. I mean, I see it all the time. You see it all the time.
Yes.
When a listing goes on the market and it's priced right, within 2 weeks, it seems to be under contract. And I mean, especially around, it's absolutely crazy. And it's an unhealthy market when that happens, because the ones who suffer the most are the first-time home buyers.
Yeah.
You know, and let's say that's a married couple, they've been renting, they've been saving, and they're waiting on the sidelines. They're waiting and they're looking where they want to live. And as soon as that listing comes up and it meets their criteria, even at a minimum level, they're jumping on it. And unfortunately, there's multiple people jumping on it, and that's why these prices
They wind up selling. Yeah, they wind up selling over list. And so let's talk about, because people look at this and see now, wow, inflated prices. This sounds like '08 or all that. And just having been in '08, the big difference is that back in that period of time, if you were selling a home, the appraiser was not necessarily connected to the bank. They were independent of the bank. They would basically appraise the property for whatever you needed, or the purchase price. And this purchase price, no matter how inflated it was, would be financed in.
Yeah.
And so now you had homeowners that were upside down, and you had banks which were upside down. Now, if the list price is $500,000, let's just say, and the price goes at $550,000, the difference is not financed in typically. It is there's cash coming, and so you might have homeowners that are upside down, is in the consideration of what the home is worth to what they paid for it, but you don't have banks that are upside down.
Right.
And that, I think, is a big difference, that the banks are still keeping their position, and the homeowners are actually winding up putting more money into it. And a lot of times homeowners are making that decision, saying, hey, listen, there's a place I want to live. I have the cash. I want this home. And it's not necessarily investment, and return on investment is not the only consideration. There are other considerations in this, and the homeowner understands they're taking the risk.
Right.
So
one data point that I found is almost 40% of homeowners do not have a mortgage in the U.S. right now, which is something I didn't know. I was kind of amazed at. Now, most of those people are on the older spectrum, retired, have paid off for their home.
Yeah.
But that's why a lot of cash deals are happening.
Yeah.
A lot of cash deals, and I want to say close to 20%. Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot more cash deals being done these days than ever before.
Okay.
'Cause there is a segment that is mortgage free and can pay cash.
Yeah, so here we are in the end of March. This is when we're recording this, and everyone is waiting for the inventory to pop. And so, that is to say, if you want to list your home and get maximum bang for the buck, I believe now is the time.
Historically, the spring home market is the time to list your house.
Yes.
Now through May.
Yeah.
This is historically the busiest time. Spring is happening, at least here in the Midwest and other parts of the country. People are excited. People have been pent up. They're looking. And people are, real estate has become a hobby.
Yes.
People love looking at listings just for fun, and they dream about buying something. And some people have the financial means or wherewithal, I'm going to do it.
Yep.
But yeah, now is the time, and I think there will be a bump up this spring in inventory. In February, I believe there was a 9.5% increase in the number of listings nationwide.
Okay.
So that's a good sign.
Yep.
But once again,
Sign of life.
Yeah, there's so many people just embedded in their homes for one reason or another, and they're not selling. And the new home market is a whole different thing that we could touch upon.
Yep.
But building a home, very expensive these days, and the developers are not developing to meet the needs of the demand that exists out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, so that's what you might see. Is you might see a couple of things. You might see builders starting to step up and meet the demand, and we see that in some of the outskirt areas of Chicagoland. Okay, Matt. Finally, I want to talk about there was an article that was written by one of our partner attorneys that talked about the death of real estate in Chicago, or
commercial
real estate in Chicago. And just about the fact that there are 30% vacancies in Chicagoland commercial real estate. I don't know if you have any commentary or insight on that.
So commercial real estate, take that off to the side, separate that from residential.
Absolutely.
Two completely different
Yep.
markets, two completely different types of groups dealing with it. But commercial real estate, especially post-COVID, has been challenging. Especially using Chicago, downtown Chicago as an example, and more even specific, the LaSalle Street corridor. For those of you that have been in Chicago, the LaSalle Street corridor was the financial heartbeat
Yeah.
of the city of Chicago. And if you go down there on a weekday now, it is not what it used to be. You know, you had the Board of Trade anchoring it, and then
All the
going
banks and such.
going
Yeah.
north. It's just not what it used to be. And so that's just an example of maybe more than 30% vacant rate. But as people watching this and just people in general, the workplace dynamic has shifted where companies that established had buildings, had offices, rented multiple floors. They don't need that anymore. And they realized during COVID, hey, I could operate my business with much of, if not all of my workforce remote. And then conversely, the workforce says, I don't want an hour plus commute each day to come into the office. And right now, I think there's going to become a balance between being in the office, who needs to be out of the office, what does.
And kind of the city, the major players of the city saying, hey, get your people back, whether it's good or bad for them or
Right.
whoever, get them in here. We need restaurants, we need commerce, we need people hub. So there's, people may be calling people back to work, and they are, and it may not have anything to do with productivity. It may just have to do with viability for the city. So there's a lot of pressure, a lot of different dynamics. And so everyone's trying to weed through that, and then other companies are taking advantage of this desire for of flexibility and starting to pick off some of these big financial players that are being driven into the city.
If you're looking for office space, there's no better time to be negotiating for office space. If you are a property owner or landlord trying to rent office space, you're in a challenging spot because the demand isn't necessarily there. And so what comes to mind is this is the time to sort of, from a community standpoint, a city standpoint, how do you redevelop these?
How do you rethink it, right?
Rethink commercial properties into, and there's some out there. There was just an article in New York about an office building that just opened up in New York. A lot of green space, restaurants, workout facilities. Which
Maybe even flexible work spaces that are coming up, right?
Absolutely.
Schools coming in, daycare.
So this is, as with anything, things change.
Yeah.
And people are used to, this is how it was. We went downtown or we went to the suburban office complex, and this is where we go for the day, and then we come home. And like you said, businesses, the restaurants, the bars, they sprung from there. From a city perspective, you want people in commercial properties.
Yep.
And so using LaSalle Street, one of the visions is potentially creating a lot of residential community within there, which will keep things in the area.
Bubbling.
Right.
Yep.
So that's what you want. Being a city guy, born and raised, love downtown. It's like I want to see downtown flourish.
Me too.
You go down there these days, it's crowded, but not like it was.
Yeah, I think there is going to have to be a residential component to fill in that commercial. I don't think the commercial will ever come back to where you'll have people from the burbs coming into the city day after day, grinding. I think, and I'm in some ways I'm glad. I think those days are over now. To have people moving into the city and working in the city and have it more holistic. People are looking for a more holistic work experience. I think they're happier. I think they're more productive. And I think they will give more to the company that is going to allow them to have a more integrated lifestyle. That's just my take on it. I'd love to see the comments on all that kind of thing.
But to answer the question, is commercial real estate dead? I would say absolutely not.
Yes,
it's just in a transformative time period where a lot of people are looking at this and trying to figure out what the next steps are. I'm going to give a plug for an earlier podcast that Steve did with Brad Hedich.
Yes.
I believe it dropped this past January 2024, where Brad, who's a commercial lender, big in the commercial space, gives his overview and sort of economic outlook for 2024 in the commercial space. So if people wanted to learn more, and hear more information about what's happening in commercial, I think that's a great episode for them to check out.
Awesome. All right, Matt. So quick fire to wrap up our program. Justin Fields was just traded. Are the Bears going to take Caleb Williams as number one?
All signs point to yes.
Okay.
And I said for quite a while that they were not going to trade Justin Fields. They were going to keep him. So I was completely wrong.
Okay.
So the management.
We weren't going to bring that up, but okay.
So they have made the decision. I'm convinced it's probably Caleb Williams, but who knows? Knowing the Bears, they may trade down. I know they're
might have some other folks on the
correct.
radar.
There's other quarterbacks down the list that will do equally as well. But eager to see. I've been a Bears fan forever, and it just breaks my heart to see what has happened.
Okay, so Matt, it is March. So next March, when we talk about the spring market, will we be talking about a Bears playoff team or no?
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
But they are in place to be in the playoffs should they get the right quarterback in the situation.
Okay.
I like
so a little hedge, but you're going with no.
I think their defense has done very well. I think their offense with who they've signed.
Swift, the Chargers
Swift
guy.
and Allen.
Yeah. DJ Moore.
I think they have the
some
pieces.
linemen.
What's working against them is they're in the same division with the Packers, the
Of course.
Lions.
Yes.
And so you got to keep up with the teams in your division,
Yep.
and hopefully they're on the right track.
Okay. Off to something more important.
Yes.
The Cubs.
Love
So
the Cubs.
do we think the Cubs are going to have a playoff team this year?
I think they are positioned to make the playoffs potentially as a wild card this year.
Okay.
I
So I like the new coach from the Brewers.
I've always
Thank you, the Brewers.
I've always liked Craig Counsell.
Mm-hmm.
I liked him as a player. He's a tough-nosed guy, and he's done very well as a leader, manager of the Brewers. So I think he's going to bring that. And that's why the Cubs got rid of David Ross, who everybody loved, who everybody thought would stay there. And I think he was surprised as anybody when they said,
See you
"You're
later."
out.
Yep.
We're bringing in Counsell." So I think they have the right person
Yep.
to lead them, like they did with Joe Madden
Yep.
for 16, well, before that, and the right tools, right people in place. I'm glad they re-signed Bellinger.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to have a nice year, and their pitching staff, I think, is going to be pretty good.
All right. And so Hawks, we know they aren't going to make the playoffs.
They are not.
What about the Bulls?
If the Bulls make the playoffs, they'll be one and done.
Okay, one and done. Okay. And now, will the White Sox still have a baseball team come next year this time?
They will still have a
Okay.
baseball team.
All right.
Will they?
You're going with yes.
They will be a baseball team, but will they be here, Nashville? Will they be playing in Comiskey? Well, whatever it's whatever
the
the
next
rate,
one, yeah.
or downtown.
Who knows?
We'll see. I feel bad for the White Sox.
Yeah.
but I know there's a lot of fans out there.
Yes.
I don't dislike the White Sox. I always root for both teams, but I'm Cubs fan, true and true.
Okay. Yeah, you're not a Sox hater. You like to see.
Not a
I was
hater.
big
I'd
fan
like
of
to see-
Ozzie Sox are some of the best Chicago
Yeah,
sports in the
the
world.
05 team was very
Yeah,
fun, and
yeah.
Guillen as manager was absolutely hilarious
Yeah.
each and every day. But yeah, I like to see sports teams do well. You know,
Okay.
when the Blackhawks were on their run, it was so exciting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when the Bulls championship, the 3 and then 3. I mean, it's a buzz in the city. It's exciting. When the Bears won the Super Bowl, I mean, it was just an electricity that I hope everybody could experience. But unfortunately, we're sort of in a downtime right now.
Okay. So, Matt, you send out, we have a newsletter that goes out that has a lot of market data. And so if people want to sign up for or find the newsletter,
Yeah.
well, how can they sign up for it?
So you could find.
Should we put it in our notes?
We could put it in our notes, but
Yeah.
I'm going to give a couple things. You can always go to our website, mylandtrust.com.
Okay.
For everything you ever wanted to know about land trust title. Like Steve said, we do a newsletter that hits thousands of realtors, thousands of attorneys, but you can always access that via all of we post those each month. So this typically goes out the last week of each month. So you can go to any of our social media platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, or Instagram, where that information is posted. You could always email me. We can get you on the list, but it's always good, valuable information for realtors as well as attorneys of what's happening in the marketplace and what's happening with our organization.
Yeah, and they can always get our latest podcast on there too.
Absolutely. So
Awesome.
Once again, our social channels and our website are the main conduits where you could find out and get the latest information on what's happening.
Great. Okay, so that wraps up our Market Watch. Thanks a lot. Matt, thank you for being with us. We look forward to doing this hopefully once a month. And so have a great beginning of the spring market, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to the People Not Titles podcast. We are proudly sponsored by Land Trust Title Services. If you enjoyed the podcast, please hit the like button, please subscribe, and we'd love it if you'd share our podcast with your friends. Thanks a lot.